Myers to celebrate Meera's new book, The Gorgeous, The Wonderful, The View from the Very Best House in Town. To tell you a little bit about the people who we're with tonight, Meera grew up in Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C., and attended the University of Virginia, followed by Stanford Law. And after practicing public interest law for a number of years, she turned to creative writing, and so was born her debut novel. I'll say it again, The View from the Very Best House in Town. And we're joined by Meera's lovely friend and friend of Children's Book World, Alison Green Myers, who is the program director for the Highlights Foundation, a national writing fellow, and an active member of the Society of Children's Books Writers and Illustrators. Alison's book, A Bird Will Soar, came out last year, and we did a wonderful event with her and Meera for that one too. So we're excited to welcome you both back and celebrate Meera's book. Remember that you can buy your signed copy at childrensbookworld.net, and if you stay tuned, you can win an exclusive prize at the end. So I'll pass it off to Alison, and I know she has some great questions prepared for Meera, and we're going to hear all about the book.
Yes. Thank you so much, Amanda. Thank you for having us, and thank you to Children's Book World for once again hosting another wonderful author event. I'll start by saying also thank you to Meera. Meera, thank you so much for allowing me to be part of this special night. As Amanda said, I'm Alison Green Myers. I am really excited to be here. And I'm excited that you're all tuning in. Thank you all for being here. To say that I am excited for Meera and for this book is an understatement. I have been waiting patiently for years and years and years for this book to come into the world. The book that we're talking about tonight is The View from the Very Best House in Town. And really it shares with readers, new friends, new friendships, some pretty creeptastic house haunting. For those of you who have read it, you know just what I mean. And so many ways to consider this question that I think we're all grappling with at one time or another, which is, where do we put our energies? Where do we put our values when it comes to valuing people over objects, over fancy things? It's beautiful. It's beautifully done. The book has been out for just a little over a week, and while I hope many of you watching have had the chance to either read the book or listen to the absolutely amazing audiobook version, I know that a week isn't very long. So if you haven't, I hope that you do take Amanda's suggestion and order the book from Children's Book World to support Meera, to support the book, and to support Children's Book World. And with that, I'll say, Meera, hello. Thank you. Congratulations, my friend.
Thank you. Before we get started, I want to thank you so much for doing this with me. It means the world to have you here and have another conversation through Children's Book World. And Children's Book World, thank you for hosting me and Amanda. It's always a pleasure to be working with your wonderful store. And thank you to everyone watching, because it means a lot that you're spending your evening here.
Great. So, should we do it? Let's jump in. I feel like I've gotten the chance to know this book inside and out, so I really want to dig in tonight. I want to talk about things that I think people who have read the book will, connect with, and people who haven't yet, hopefully they'll get hooked right away and they'll jump right into the book too. So I wanted to start in a place that when I think of you, I think of this, you as a writer. I want to start with the themes in the book. I think they really stand out. You decided to write this book in a very interesting way. It's very close. We're in this multiple point of view. We have Sam, we have Asha, we have Donnybrooke. And throughout, even though there are these three very different points of view, you've really woven in these themes through all of the points of view. We're dealing with, a major theme of bullying, finding oneself. We're looking at the ebb and flow when it comes to friendships, new friendships, lost friendships, gained friendships. And then again, that idea, that personal idea of what do we value? What do we really value in our own lives? So I want to start with theme tonight, and I want to ask, how do they come to you? how did you do it then specifically in this book to kind of work together with these 3 points of view and these really major themes?
It's a good question. I'm glad you started with theme because I start with theme. Writing a novel is so much work, as you know, that to kind of be, I think every writer, whatever it is, it might be theme, it might be character, it might be plot, but you need something kind of pushing you forward through the drafts and through the effort. And for me, it really is theme and having these big questions in my head. And I wish, honestly, sometimes there was an easier way for me to answer them to my satisfaction. But apparently, the way my brain works now, I need really long, fictional, in-depth answers to the questions I'm grappling with. And I mean, so the first question was exactly, I'm so glad you said that, about like, what do we value? What do we show we value? What do we claim we value? Which is often like, oh, we just want to treat everyone well and we just care about people. But then, in our everyday lives, how is that playing out? Is that really what we tell people we value? Or are we valuing things like objects, like a fancy house, but also, or people for their achievements rather than just their existence and just their being? And what happens when there's that mismatch? And why do we do that? I think through the course of this book, I mean, everyone, I think, sometimes has made a mistake in sort of what you've thinking, oh, I wish I hadn't pushed that so much. But often those mistakes come from a place of wanting to do what's right, but just being so anxious about the outcome that we can't just let go and let ourselves value people for who they are, and trust that that is enough. So that was a big theme in terms of values. And then the ebb and flow in friendships in terms of actual kind of plot and characters, that was probably the first thing that came to me. I think all of us, and certainly I have had friendships that I was sure they'd last forever and then they don't. But then having new friendships that are so, kind of come out of nowhere and are so rich and unexpected. And then friends, I hesitate to say this, but I am now old enough. And these are friendships are for when I was very young. I now have friends that I've been friends with for 40 years. But even those friendships ebbed and flowed, but somehow they kept going. Even if we didn't talk for months or even a year, we could still pick up where we left off. And so friendships come in so many forms. And it's not always predictable what will end up. But the biggest feeling I was trying to get, so much of what drives my writing is theme, but then also emotion, is that feeling when you feel like a friend has outgrown you. They've gotten some luck, some growth, something, and they don't need you anymore. Maybe they feel that way too. Like maybe it's not in your head. And I think with Asha and Sam, that's really what's happened. And the pain that they're dealing with is not just the lost friend, but this feeling like we were in this together and now we're not. And these external factors are affecting a relationship that I'm sure for years they couldn't even imagine their lives without. And both of them are really affected by this loss. And on a superficial level, for those of you who haven't read the book, Asha and Sam have been friends for a long time. And then Sam gets into a prestigious private school and he's kind of moved on, and his parents sort of feel like he's moved on. And Asha feels like, where has that left me? But I think it's clear from the choices Sam's making that he's really unmoored too without this friendship in his life and without this kind of his one closest peer relationship grounding him too. And so how does that play out? And then meanwhile, and then what fills those spaces? I mean, sometimes it's another friendship, but sometimes it's having the space to learn to accept yourself too. And then, bullying. So I was like, I know there was a theme. So that's interesting. Bullying. So there's a girl who attends the prep school that Sam attends, Castleton Academy. Her name's Prestyn, and she lives in what is, Donnybrooke, the very best house in town. And she does bully Sam. And it's a sort of more insidious kind of bullying. She's not just getting into a fist fight with him. It's a psychological bullying. There's a lot of gaslighting going on. And I feel like that kind of bullying is sometimes the hardest to shake off. But the thing I really wanted to explore, I didn't actually come at it thinking of bullying. I came at it from the direction of thinking, why do kids and adults, but in this case, kids, allow themselves to be in a situation where they're being mistreated? And sort of the answer I came to was because they don't feel like they have any other options. So, like, why don't they feel like they have any other options? What are the circumstances? And for me, a lot of that is thinking, well, the other options are worse. So maybe that's isolation, you know, maybe that's a worse set of friends. Maybe that's letting down people or letting down yourself. And so, in a way, the bullying itself, even though it propels a lot of the plot, was secondary to like, what are the circumstances that allow that to happen? And in that, I was also thinking a big piece of that is bystanders. And one reason you might feel like you don't have any other options is because you don't have other friends. And you can kind of see that in the difference between Asha definitely has friendship difficulties, but there are other people and other kids in her life who are like, yeah, come sit with us. I mean, they might not be your best friend. She might be jealous of them. It doesn't always go smoothly, but there are people there who welcome her. And Sam doesn't have that, and how that can play out in really different directions. And for bystanders, they're bystanders, you know, closer to the bullying that I explore in my book. And that often when we talk about bystanders, you know, in, you know, a school assembly or whatever, we're talking about that person close, but they're also the people who, you know, all of us day in and day out are in a school or work or whatever setting, and we see who has more social status and who might have less. And do we, you know, extend ourselves for them? Do we try to bring more people in and be more inclusive or less? And another piece of that was also in terms of the circumstances that can lead to that behavior is adults. And a lot of times with adults, they know enough not to engage in the type of bullying that Prestyn does. But they often, I think, might be ignorant of the more subtle forms of ableism that they're engaging in. So this came a little later in the book, but early on, an article is written about Sam where he's called a miracle boy because he's autistic but goes to this school. And at a very superficial level, I think the writer of the article and administrators at a school feel like they're doing some sort of favor by pointing this out. But really, it's ableist, and by adults sending the signal to kids that this kid is different or they're only valued for their disability, or you're doing something nice even by being nice to this kid, as opposed to that this is another person who has stuff to offer just like any other person. That also, I think, creates circumstances where bullying can happen and where kids feel isolated. So, but I do, after all this talk about theme, Alison can vouch for me, there's also a lot of funny parts in the book too.
There are so many funny parts. I'm so glad that you brought up the adults too, because I really do. I mean, the way that the book is set up, certainly it's a middle grade book, but I think that the parents, the teacher, the adults that are in this world also really flow into those themes. And specifically that last one that we were talking about, when it comes to values, and that a lot is modeled through the parents that are, you know, a part of this community. And that was really, really well done. So let's keep going with that. Let's keep going with some of those standout things that you have in this book. Certainly the theme, and another really heavy hit thing that I think you do very naturally in your writing. Maybe process wise, you'll say, no, you know, it's not that. But this book, so we're going through these themes, and you're taking us on a grand tour of this town. I mean, we are going all over. We're in stores, we're in schools, we're in offices, we're in houses, we're in trees, you know, and yet we feel deeply rooted to one place. There is a definite sense of place in this story. I can, you know, close my eyes and I can picture something you've done so well, where you're putting the characters in a lot of tight spaces. I mean, it's tight situations, but it's literally tight spaces, like, the elevator or the utility closet or underneath the covers, inside the branches of a tree. Even, thinking about like the tippy top of that roof deck at Donnybrooke. So you have all of these tight spots. And one of the words that I keep seeing used to describe your book is thriller. I see that in a lot of places. And I really think that what you did with the setting really helped to kind of push that forward. We have this sense of closeness. For me, those kind of things feel very comforting. Like close spaces can feel comforting, and yet the way that so many of those spaces are read in your book, it is setting up these moments of tension. So I thought maybe you could talk to us. You've talked to us a little bit about your process with theme, but maybe you could also explore a little bit of setting, especially since actual houses, mansions, come into play so much with this. So, how did you develop the setting, and what were you trying to do, I think, with the tension in the story when it came to the setting?
Yeah, so you sort of answered the question when you're like, and you're going to be like, haha, no, it doesn't come naturally at all. Haha, no, it doesn't come naturally at all, which is, I know, a little ironic since like a third of the book is actually narrated from the point of view of part of the setting, that mansion Donnybrooke. But setting, I have general senses of the setting, but to me, setting, I should maybe not admit this, but it's like the best tool for an author. Like, wow, like I can make so much work by tweaking the setting. It's such a practical tool for me. And I don't want to, I'll get into that for a second. I do want to make clear, like, I have to believe my story when I'm writing it, that on some level, this is true. Even if it's in a fictional world, it's true. And so I do take great care with the setting. Like, for example, so Coreville, the town it takes place in, is a fictional town, but in my head, it's in the mid-Atlantic US. So I have a calendar where I've set out where every date happens. This book corresponds to 2019 dates. For example, October 31st is on a Thursday. And if you look at every date will line up. Like I have marked the dates of where every single thing happens in this book. Then I will go to timeanddate.com and look up sunset time. So I know when daylight savings is. I want to know what the light is exactly. I will look up the flora and fauna. What are the trees that are going to grow there? Because I know for me, if I read about a giant sequoia in a place that sounds like Maryland, I'm going to be totally out of, like, it's just, I'm out and I need to be in that story. I will draw maps, both like floor plans and of the town and where things are generally, because that setting has to make the story feel real to me, and then I think to a reader. And then I think this is sort of going to answer both the spaces maybe a little and how I use setting. Like, for example, I'll know the characters come very early in the process for me and their tension. So for example, I knew there was going to be a confrontation scene between Sam's mom and Asha and her mom, but I didn't know. And I maybe would, in a very early draft, would draft some dialogue around that, but I don't know where it is. And then this was somewhat subconscious, but I put it at the grocery store you mentioned, but it's not an ordinary grocery store. It's kind of a high-end grocery store called Coreville Farm Cart, which is one of those like simple names to hide how completely pretentious it is with, overpriced. It's kind of a cross between, a high-end organic chain and a store that I grew up with, which was called Giant Gourmet, where they would have like a big chocolate, stand and all of that. And I have that. And I think this is I put them in the grocery store, and you talk about spaces. One thing I loved about the grocery store is you can be in the same place as someone for like 25 minutes, have no idea. And then boom, you turn the aisle and there is no avoiding them. Like one of the characters has to physically backtrack and then like bumps into a display. Like you are stuck suddenly and there you are. And I did love that. But I think also on a subconscious level, I was like, this is an interesting way to explore class and other dynamics, to have the store that, Asha, it's like a special treat to go to, and they'll just pick up a little gelato, but they can't shop there every week. But then clearly other people do. But then in terms of building it so it feels real, let's say I've got this and that's really working for this scene and setting the tone and the mood, then I want to make that appear multiple times in the story so it does feel familiar and it does feel like a town. So now I've got this mansion where there's fancy parties. Well, where's the catering going to come from? Okay, Coreville farm cart, like where else, and weaving those setting details in. Or if Asha has a Japanese maple she likes to sit in, well, we're going to go back to that tree, multiple times. And then in terms of small spaces and setting the mood, I think setting also as a tool for an author is an amazing way to show to reveal character. So for example, that roof deck, Asha and Sam have wildly different views of that roof deck. For Asha, it's liberating and beautiful and just a visual delight. And for Sam, it's, a place of fear even before he's ever set foot on it. And that kind of gives you a sense of both of them. And I also like it when the same place can look different depending on how the character's feeling. So how Asha, her vision of Donnybrooke, at the beginning versus at a moment of high tension really changes. And that lets me play a lot with language and description to set tone in a way that hopefully feels like natural and builds up those elements. And it's interesting you talk about the thriller, because I wasn't trying to write a thriller at all, but as a kid, like I loved reading mysteries. I read all the Nancy Drews, even though I would even like complain about the stereotypes, but I couldn't stop reading about them. like so torn. I just read so many mysteries. And I think for me, I don't want to write a book I wouldn't want to read. I mean, I want beautiful writing. I want a lot of emotion on the page, but I also want a book where I want to turn the pages and I feel like I should give that to the reader. And so I think that comes in naturally. And then the small spaces, I think a lot of it is thinking about the characters. I wasn't trying to do small spaces, but they seemed to fit, like that kept fitting for what I was trying to do and what I was trying to say and what would happen next.
And I love too that, and I love that you mentioned that too about the perspective being different for different characters. I mean, I think that's how you write a book that has multiple points of view, and you know that you're switching to a different point of view because of the characters' interaction with that setting as well. Or even, I can picture Asha in that utility closet, and there was one sense of security in there until someone else enters the room, and the whole atmosphere changes inside the room. And your chapters are very, very small, but you do that so well. The emotions can shift so well, and there's that piece of the setting that really does that. And you have freely now said, when I said maybe it comes to you naturally, and you said, oh, maybe naturally isn't the right word. I think some of it does. But it to me, it sounds like you have this opportunity to develop it further and further and further, draft after draft after draft. So let's lean into that a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about the process. So when I think of your writing, as I said, I really think whether I'm talking about House or even some of your upcoming projects, I think about the way that you're infusing emotion and tone and theme and setting, and you're building those pieces in. So what I know is that this is a long thought process. This is multiple drafts. This is hearing feedback from different people. You like to you like to take your time with stories. And like me, I'll say, but this is what I mean to say, and it's just this is what I'm trying to say, and it slowly kind of comes out on the page. So let's go back. Let's go back before the book was, a physical book, and tell us a little bit about kind of that process. Tell us a little bit about the things that have stayed, the heart of the story that has stayed the same, and maybe some things that surprised you that came through in the process from, first idea through this final physical book?
So for me, writing very much is like I have this idea in my head and I'm just trying to get it physically out of my head. But the problem is the idea in my head is like only partially formed. Like it's like in that space between conscious and subconscious, and I'm like trying to hold it, and then it goes, and then it comes, but then I'm like, I don't know what this means, or I have a question about this. And so it's this struggle. So I do feel like the book, I mean, I'm happy with it in that I do feel like all those years ago, I was going for something like this, even if I didn't know it. And one thing I like about myself as a writer when I can do it is I try to give myself the space to do what you said and just start with a little bit and layer on and do a draft and work through it and be okay with the fact that I don't know what the best way to tell this story is going to be. Like, I don't know how I'm going to tell this story, but I know I have something here, and just try to get something down and then try something that may or may not work and then go from there. So some things I knew friendship, like this, all the thematic stuff we talked about, I knew pretty early on. And specifically that Asha and Sam were autistic kids who had this friendship that fell apart, and that there were going to be these pressures. Their families are going to come at it from different angles. You know, they both, I would say all their parents are loving, but they're all trying to do what's best for their kid, and they might have different ideas of what that path should look like. I knew pretty early on that a family like the Donaldsons would exist in a big house, and fairly early on that house was going to narrate it. I knew that I wanted the place to feel real and recognizable, but as we talked about, I didn't know what that place would be. It's interesting though, even though I feel like this looks very much what I was trying to get at, I didn't know what it would look like at all. So things I didn't know, I think, are somewhat more interesting, because you can say, oh, I knew this and that, and then it's like, oh, it was a book, but there was so much I didn't know. I didn't know Sam would be a viewpoint character. I had a mansion talking before Sam, and the drafts just kept feeling kind of thin and like not really. And I couldn't we were seeing Asha through Sam's perspective a lot. And I'm pleased with that, but that was only part of the story. So I actually just started doing some drafting of Sam to get a better sense, like, what would Sam say here? Well, what's Sam experiencing? So I could then supplement my Asha chapters. I do that a lot. But as I did that, I was like, oh, wait a second. Sam has not Sam. I mean, all your characters hopefully have a story within the story, but Sam needs to speak here, and Sam needs to tell us things that are happening that we can't know from the other two points of view. A lot of the side characters I didn't know. You know, I knew there would be side characters, but like who they were, what they do, yeah, took some time to figure that out. I didn't know that Donnybrooke would have an arc. I really thought Donnybrooke was just a device for explaining the action, but Donnybrooke has a very definite character arc. And I'm so pleased with that. I mean, I think that really adds, hopefully, some moral heft to the story. And the Donaldsons, Prestyn, who is the girl who bullies Sam, has an arc. And her parent, particularly her father, does too. And I really didn't necessarily expect that. And one reason I actually was probably going to be like, I don't want an arc, because I don't want, sometimes I think kids' books can make it sound like, okay, and we're all fine at the end and everything's forgiven. And I think it's more complicated than that. To me, that wouldn't be an honest way to write the story. But I was pleased that I could come up with an arc that doesn't necessarily resolve things more neatly than I feel like I could honestly say they should be resolved. Yeah, there was a lot. The farm cart. But then it's funny, Alison, do you see this with your books too, where like some things I feel like I'm making up, but some things just feel like discoveries of what's already there. So like with Donnybrooke, the mansion, like there's a weather vane, and like what the weather vane looks like. I looked up weather vanes and I was like, oh, it's, an eagle getting a fish. And I now know that to me, that was like a fact of the book I had to discover. That is true. I could not change that. It's not like, I know that sounds crazy because I wrote it, but I actually feel like that is a fact of the story. Whereas like the number of car garages, I think I mentioned it's a 5-car garage, but if someone's like, no, make it a 3-car garage, I'm like, okay. Like it's not really, essential to the story in any way, like, so it's interesting. Some of what I didn't know felt like it was waiting to be discovered, where other things just do feel like things I created along the way.
I love that. And I love the thought behind that too. Like as a creative person, as you are, that there is trust there. And, right now going into another project, I don't know about you, but that trust feels like it just slips out, and I don't know where it is. But that you're saying it, it's so beautiful to think. It's just waiting for me to discover it. Like that, we should make T-shirts, and that would be lovely.
Not to be too cynical, but like, so I have an idea for a new book, and like I'm not drafting it, so I feel like I'd be like, yeah, and it's gonna be beautiful, and then like I'm gonna start writing and be like, oh my god, it's so much easier to talk like that when you're not actually in it doing the work.
Yeah,
I feel like
looking back on it.
Full disclosure.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I wanted to, because we were talking about all these big things, and I know that the book has only been out for a little over a week, and many people probably haven't had the chance to sample some of these different points of view. So we've been talking a lot tonight about the fact that there are 3 points of view. One of them happens to be a mansion. We have Sam, we have Asha, we're going through this story, and we're changing our perspective as we're traveling through the town. And so I thought it might be fun to play a quick game, and it'll be the view from the very best house in town version of whose point of view is it anyway. And I thought, you've been reading so much of the book. I know that you read it last week at Politics and Prose. I know that you've been reading it during other events. So I thought, how about I try and test your knowledge of these point of view characters? And I could read a short passage and just see, whose point of view is it anyway? Would you be able to name Sam, Asha, or Donnybrooke? And I tried to be as tricky as possible as I was going back through to find them. So what do you think? Can we play a quick round?
I am up for it on a few conditions. First, for the audience, I would like to set expectations. First of all, Alison has not told me what the lines are. I do not know.
No.
Second, I've had a long day. Third, so Alison exaggerates how much of this book I've been reading. Yes, I did read a Politics and Prose, but it was just very short passages, so you all wouldn't get bored. So, as Alison mentioned, like I wrote this, she's been waiting years and years and years. So that's how long ago I wrote this. So I had the book deal like 2 years ago. I have not, yes, I have read it, but like the line she is reading, I might have written, and pardon me, years ago. So I just want everyone in the audience to think how well they remember what they wrote like 4 years ago, and cut me a little slack if I don't know what I actually wrote. That is my only request. But yes, let's do it. I'm good.
Also, I went, hunting through the book to be like, I wonder if I could stump Meera with this. So that's just a little bit
you
about,
probably can.
That's a little bit about me. But I do. So you'll sit back, you'll listen. I'm going to read just some short excerpts. You could have a sip of water. It'll be great. And then after I read, maybe you'll tell me if you think it's Sam, Asha, or Donnybrooke. And then if you want to, you can tell us maybe just a little bit about this part in the book. So
I remember.
Here's my first. I'm not even going to tell you which pages I'm reading from, but we're going to start here with Asha's feet. Maybe it's Asha, maybe it's Sam, maybe it's Donnybrooke. Asha's feet crunch to a stop, and she spins around in her swing. Sam, she says cheerily, like she just saw him last week. Whatever weirdness there was about Castleton is gone. He plops down next to her. Hi, Asha. Have you been under your planetarium umbrella much? Sam grins. A few times. Asha gave him the planetarium umbrella as a present 3 birthdays ago. He was a little confused when he unwrapped it and found a boring black umbrella, large enough to shelter his whole family. But then he popped it open and understood. She decorated the inside with drops of glow-in-the-dark paint, and she'd clearly followed a star map of the northern hemisphere because all the constellations lined up just as they might in real life. It's true that it's not the same as the real planetariums, but it's also true that you can't keep a real planetarium in your bedroom closet to go under whenever you choose. Sam,
Sam.
Asha, or Donnybrooke.
I'm going with Sam. I'm going with Sam.
And you are correct. Wonderful author that you are. That is one of my favorite discoveries in the book. That tangible object. Oh my goodness, Meera, I love it so much. I would love the thought of popping that up, and what a symbol of friendship there. Did that come to you? Has someone done that for you? I just want to know more about that umbrella.
No, but there are people in my life who are very good at making Halloween costumes and decorations using umbrellas, like a solar system and a jellyfish. And that actually really inspired me. But one fun writerly thing you'll notice is I had the idea, but then I was like, and they'll do like be glow in the dark sticker jewels, but then I decided they wouldn't be like like they would come off and then pop off and then it like wouldn't last. So then I was like, what? Like I really was like, I want to do this. What could it be? And then I came up with glow in the dark paint. But I did like the writer's life is spending time Googling materials that you could actually use to make the planetarium umbrella.
And now, just so you know, my birthday is in July. I would love a planetarium umbrella. Thank you very much. Okay, you did a great job with that first one. We have 2 other passages to take a look at. I'm not going to tell you whether there's nowhere in the rules that say I have to wander from Sam, even though you've already had one Sam passage. So Sam very much could be this, or Asha, or Donnybrooke. Asha's love for Donnybrooke has never only been about what it looked like. It isn't only because, as the largest, highest house in town, Donnybrooke has the most spaces and views to discover. It's about how Donnybrooke sounds, the way the atrium echoes and the carpeted basement muffles. It's about how Donnybrooke feels, not just how some moldings are as smooth as polished marble and others are shaped like teeth so that your fingers would go bump, bump, bump along them, but how it makes Asha feel like it's so big you could fit a family with 7 kids comfortably, and then you wouldn't have to work so hard at making friends because you'd always have someone to play with at home. Or you could have friends over and they would be able to find something they loved about your house, and then they would never make excuses about why they couldn't come. And even if you were by yourself, you could always find something you loved that could distract you from all the stressful thoughts you might need distracting from.
Asha.
That is Asha. Can you tell me a little bit more about that passage?
You know, it's interesting. And I don't remember if that was in when you read it. What I don't think it was. And I feel like possibly that was written. I can't remember, but I feel like it was written later where people are like, why does she love houses so much? And I was like, it's how they make her feel. I didn't want to over explain it. And but then finally I had to sort of put myself like, what is it, about these houses? And it is, of course, all like it's visual, but it's also emotional, right? I mean, and at its heart, like the two really intersect, the sensory and the emotional piece. And that I think is when things are the most powerful. So.
And I love that you said that too, that sensory, that bump, bump, bump in the teeth. There's so much of that. And again, I go back to when we were talking about there are some major themes in this book of bullying, and there are some scary, tense moments in the book too. And there are these lovely, very tangible, emotional moments. The umbrella, the love of a house like this object, and not in a way that it's how much the house costs. It has nothing to do with that. It's how the house makes her feel, and I love that. All right,
Right,
I have
and I
one.
do want to say, people, like, because Donnybrooke is large and there are people in the book who value Donnybrooke for its fanciness, I did want to make clear that, like, there's something very pure about Asha's love for Donnybrooke.
That's very true.
Okay,
Let's try one more.
one more.
I know you're gonna think it's Donnybrooke. It might be Donnybrooke. Anyway,
It might not, though.
it
It might not.
It was soon after Asha's first time in Donnybrooke. Sam and Asha were at one of their early sessions with Miss Summer playing a rhyming game. Sam goes first. Sam, bam, ram, lamb, am, ham, dam, jam, tram. He rocks it, as Rohan says. Asha has an idea. My name means hope, so I'm going to rhyme with that. Hope, soap, nope, rope, dope, cope, pope, mope. Is mope a word? Yes, says Miss Summer, opening the prize box. That's not fair, says Sam. Her name is Asha, not Hope. But Asha isn't good for rhyming, says Miss Summer, while Asha picks out a castle eraser. When they get to Asha's car, Rohan is already in the back seat between their two booster seats. Did you learn anything fun with Miss Summer? He asked. I learned that my name was bad for rhyming, says Asha. That's not necessarily a bad thing, says Rohan. Yes, it is, says Asha. There's a kid in my science class named Gene, and his name rhymes with gangrene, which is this really gross disease where your skin, that's enough, says Asha's dad. Well, his name also rhymes with spleen. And when we studied the human body, some mean kids called him Gene the spleen. What's a spleen? Asked Asha. It's part of a body you don't want your name to rhyme with, says Rohan as the car turns onto Coreville Avenue. Asha thinks about this as she spots Donnybrooke, that amazing house that belongs to Prestyn Donaldson. Asha still isn't sure what she did wrong at that party, but whatever it was, Prestyn didn't have to be that mean about it and make all her friends be mean too, because they were so mean. And then it comes to Asha in a flash. I'm not going to say what comes to her in a flash. I mean, got to leave a little mystery there, but whose point of view anyway?
That is Asha's, not Donnybrooke's. And I will not say what Prestyn rhymes with. We can see if maybe in the comments or the chat the people want to guess. But I will say I picked Prestyn's first name, Prestyn, solely because it rhymes with this word. And I actually had written out a whole list of, like, what could it possibly be, and then changed the name of Prestyn spelling eventually from T-O-N to T-Y-N. Like, I spent so much time thinking of what internal organs this girl's name could rhyme with. She was Sydney the kidney, and then I read Laura Chauvin's Last Fifth Grade of Emerson Elementary, which is a lovely book, very different from this one, but lovely, and Laura is lovely. But there was a Sydney the kidney reference, and I was like, okay, I can't do that. And I'm embarrassed to say how much time, but it is Prestyn the... Read the book.
Yes. I like thinking about you making lists. I make a lot of lists too. I've never made lists of, like, people's names and body parts to connect them. I make a lot of lists.
Nor have I. Like, Gene the spleen came right away, so I didn't need to make a list for that one. And I don't really intend to ever again in my writing process, but you do what you got to do.
So I thought maybe I'd stump you because I thought maybe you would think it was going to be a pattern where I, read one from each point of view. I had such a hard time trying to pull a Donnybrooke passage that you wouldn't know straight away, because Donnybrooke, as you know, loves to talk about themselves in the third person anyway, and almost every other word is Donnybrooke. Like, the very first time we get into the Donnybrooke point of view, of course Donnybrooke could see the girl. Donnybrooke couldn't see the boy, but blah, 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 you know, so there was so much there. So it was very hard to pull a Donnybrooke quote. I think people will really enjoy reading Donnybrooke, though, and hearing that voice as well. But you did a great job. Maybe I'll make you an umbrella that has the solar system on it, or the planetarium underneath it as your special prize. I would say, do you want to add it, because we didn't read anything from Donnybrooke's point of view? Do you have anything you want to add about that special point of view?
Just that it was very fun to write and a little
No.
emotional by the end. Like the
Yeah.
very end of Donnybrooke all makes me a little.
Yeah,
But
I love that you mentioned that too. But when I remember, I mean, years ago, again, first talking about the book and saying, and there's a point of view, and it's a mansion, and you know, and that there is this character arc for, you know, this mansion too, which I think is really special. So I'm going to say, we're coming upon our final question together, and then we're going to turn our attention to the chat and any questions that populate the chat. So please be sure, if you have a question, that you place that in the chat, so that we can share that as well. It looks like Amanda just popped up a special announcement that says if you comment or have a question in the chat, you have an opportunity to enter to win an exclusive prize right here. So Meera, I'm going to end my questions tonight, because I've loved watching the process of this book come together, and it is very much a story from your heart and your mind. But what has been so amazing is seeing it go into the hands of others. I think one of the things that is magical about creating a book, taking it from a story into a book, is that many, many, many caring hands get to be involved in the process. And so I thought it might be nice tonight just to take a few moments, and before we get to those audience questions, I see them coming in now, and just talk about who is this caring team of people, from those who are very close to you to those in the larger orbit of this beautiful book that made the view from the very best house in town come together.
so there's so many people, and I'm not going to be able to name them all here just because there's so many. But I first want to start with my parents, who just instilled such a love of reading and story in me and poetry, that I think, like, even though I didn't grow up wanting to be a writer, I loved words, I loved language, because that was something that, you know, I was encouraged with, and that kind of set the backdrop, I think, for all of this. And then my husband, Kurt, who is, you know, my biggest cheerleader and the first reader, and somehow manages to walk that incredible tightrope of being like, you can do this. This is amazing. And also, I didn't really understand that part. You might want to, but then I'll be like, no, because it's like this. And then he's like, oh yeah, that's going to be great. Yeah. So, and my kids, who are so encouraging and give their thoughts too. And then, of course, because I think the pre-publication team is so important. It's like people like you, Alison, and my writing friends and critique partners, who also are like, there's something here, like, keep going. And that means so much, because it is a long process, and it is a hard process filled with self-doubt. My agent, Molly Kurhan, is just, you know, a dream in terms of, she's so supportive. She has such a great editorial eye, such good business sense, and is so encouraging that you know, also is huge. And then I've been so lucky to work with a team at Walker Books, Candlewick. Susan Van Meter, my editor, just has like the perfect eye for things big and small. She was the editor on one of, like, my family's all-time favorite books, El Defo, which is just such an amazing book. And working with her was just such a delight, and, you know, made me better at what I did, and made this book so much better. But then people, like, I think sometimes not, I mean, I think most non-writers know you have an editor, but like, there was a book designer, like the Donnybrooke, okay, Sam pages have Sam, the Donnybrooke pages have columns. Like, it's amazing. This is a book designer, and you know, she also led the cover design. So my book designer is Maya Tatsukawa, and my cover artist was Nicole Miles, and they made this book so beautiful. And copy editors who just made sure everything was perfect and everything lined up. Karen Walsh, who does publicity and events and, organize this and organize so many things. And it's just so wonderful to work with. School and library team, like there's so many parts to a publisher, and I feel like everyone has been so supportive. And then the team in the UK, because Walker UK, because this is going to be coming out in England in the fall. So many people. But now, now that it's out, I feel like part of the team is the readers and the booksellers and the librarians and teachers who come at this book too. So I'm excited to expand the team. I know we have questions, so I'll stop very soon. But Kazuyo Ishiguro said at one point, when around the time he won the Nobel Prize, he was like, writing, I'm totally paraphrasing, and not that he would ever watch, but if he did, he'd be like, that's actually not what I said, or I said it like 18 times better than that, but okay, whatever. But it was something along the lines of like, when you write, you're saying like, this is how I see the world. Is this how you see it too? And like making that connection. And it's so gratifying when someone does look at your work and is like, yeah, I do see that, or I see that, or I see that, but what about that, and it's a launching point for connection. So that's all kind of part of the hands and part of the team, I think, that make a book come to life. So thanks.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's so beautiful, and really just such an amazing job. I mean, when you talk about the design too, the book is stunning, and it's so exciting to turn every page because of your words and because of the design behind the book too, for sure. Well, we would love to take some questions or share any comments. If anyone wants to populate them into the chat, we would love to see it. As I mentioned, you can comment with a question for a chance to win a prize this evening. And I too want to thank the audience for being here and for sharing, in this night with Meera and with the book. We certainly have a lot to celebrate with this book. I can't wait to see more and more kiddos read it. One of the things that we didn't read from, but that I know my reader at home loves so much about the book is the house haunt game that you developed in it. And I thought maybe when you talked about your team, you would talk about your technical team that helped you invent a game as well.
That is true. I did come up with the idea for the game. I was thinking, what would Sam and Asha have in common? And then I sort of thought about this video game, but it didn't exist, so I had to make it up. But of course, I am not as big a video game player as others in this world. And so once I had a draft of it, I asked one of my kids to sit down with me and kind of hammer it out. So that was, thank you. And that was also part of the team. And also like things like that. Like I'm sorry, I just saw a question in the chat that made me laugh.
Funny one.
But I did want to say, like, also part of the team, like my friend Sheila works at a public school, but it had a little planetarium. And I was like, can I see your planetarium just to get ideas? And my next door neighbor has a cherry tree. And I was like, can I climb your cherry tree? And then like one day, like some other neighbors were like, what are you doing there? Because I'm not. And I was like, don't mind me. I'm stable. I'm good. It really helped me like get the details in. So,
well, I love that. It does look like you are right. There's a question in the chat. There's several questions that are in the chat. The first one, I believe, is the one you're talking about that made you laugh. Did your early love of the line "hop on pop" inspire you to be a writer? There must be a story behind that.
Just that I loved Hop on Pop, and apparently when I was very little and my dad would like try to take a nap, I would just like jump on his stomach and he'd be like, what are you doing? And I was like, I'm hopping on Pop. But yes, I do actually love rhyme. And I do, when I write, I do try to have, obviously I'm writing prose, but like that sound I really like. So,
and when you're rhyming body parts with people's names.
Exactly. In fact, did I ever come up with Prestyn
It's not
Without
in there yet. I'll keep
Asha.
scrolling and see if that comes in. Elizabeth has a lovely comment in here. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. For a writer, this has been such a delightful dive into the writer's process and craft. Really lovely. Can you tell us what is next? Can you, Meera? Can you tell us what is
I
next?
am not allowed to say too much about what is next, except that something is next, and it's a middle grade fantasy. So it's a little bit of a different direction than what I did in this book. Although, I mean, even though this is technically realistic fiction, a house is narrating a third of the book. So yes, and there's lots. Alison has read it. There's a lot of snow. Not your typical snow, though. Not your typical snow. Allison, I think I actually had a conversation with you where I was totally in denial. Do you remember this? And I was like, oh, I'm thinking about this book, and it's like realistic fiction, but it has some magic snow. And you were like, so sweet. You're like, okay, okay. Like if that's
I
where
probably
you are,
said, can I read it? That sounds interesting. I did. It's awesome, and everyone will love it and be enamored with the snow in the same way that I was. And talk about the way you do setting and the way you do theme. It's another brilliant example of that. There's another question in here. It looks like Mimi is asking, was any part of this book based on personal experiences? What a great question.
So I think the answer to that is yes and no. In like a literal sense, no. Did any of the things happen in this book happen, in my life? No. But I think the personal comes in that sort of bigger question about theme that Alison and I were talking about in terms of like, to me, this is a really honest book. And this is what I think characters and people in the circumstances, how it would play out, which is based on my life experience and what I see in my point of view. So I think, like, if you read this book, do you learn like, oh, this happened to Meera in any literal sense? No. But I do think if you read this book, and not just me, any author's book, fictional book, you get a sense of their worldview, because that's what's inspiring them to write. And that is going to be infused in the choices they have their characters make, because this is what they think would happen. This is what they think is true.
Yeah, I love that. There's another very nice comment in here. It says no question, but love listening to everything you have to say and look forward to reading the book. It will delight you. It's lovely. It's wonderful. Well, with that, I'm so thrilled to have been here with you on a night that I've been looking forward to for a very, very long time. The book is, yes, it is an emotional hard hit in the book, and also these moments of levity and joy, and you find characters who you want to spend more time with. That's one of my favorite questions to ask kiddos after they've read a book. Who in there do you want to spend more time with? And you have really delighted your readers with characters that we want to spend more time with. So congratulations to you. Congratulations to all the future readers that are here and that are everywhere. And I think Amanda's going to help us with our special exclusive prize.
Yes. So for those of you who commented your questions, while your questions were being answered, I entered everybody into a random generator. And so there are 2 people who are going to win a free copy of The View from the Very Best House in Town. And those 2 people are Prestyn and Mimi. And so I will I'll message you on those platforms. And feel free you can also email info@childrensbookworld.net and be in touch with us that way, and we can get you your prize, because I don't have everyone's contact information.
I actually have that contact information.
You do? Okay. Well, then
we'll help you out.
I'll grab that. We'll share that later, and then you can get your exclusive prize.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. A giveaway is a lot of fun too. And I do want to say, I know it's not at Children's Book World right now, but if you have an opportunity to also listen to the audio version, the narration of this book is stellar. It's just so well done.
Yes.
It's really, really wonderful.
I should have mentioned them to the team. It's amazing. The producer and the three actors who acted are fantastic. It was like coming alive in what was in my head finally like came alive. Excellent.
I love audiobooks.
Well,
We actually, if you would like to purchase the audiobook and support Children's Book World, you can purchase it on Libro FM through our affiliate link that you can probably find on childrensbookworld.net as well, or in our social media bios. And it is an audiobook platform that supports small bookstores. And it is one of my favorites to use. So feel free to listen to the beautiful audiobook of this through that.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that, Amanda. That's wonderful. Meera, I'm going to turn things back to you. I would say after friends have had a chance to read or listen, please make sure to write a review. It definitely supports the author in so many ways. And Meera, I couldn't be happier for you that this book is out in the world and for your readers. Congratulations to you.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you, Alison, for all you did supporting me tonight and with this book. And thank you, Amanda and Children's Book World, for being just in the world and so wonderful, and for this evening.
Well, thank you both for being here and creating this wonderful event. I love to see both of your rapport together. You always have such great discussions. So can't wait for somebody's next project to come out and have another one of these. Well, congratulations again. And you can get your signed copy at childrensbookworld.net. Thank you so much, guys. This was a wonderful night.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night, everybody.